There's two words that Jagex can say that either make a group of players happy or very mad. Game integrity. A game integrity change is an unpulled change to the game that Jagex introduces, which is incredibly rare. 99.9% of updates are pulled and are either approved or disapproved of by the player base. But game integrity updates are automatically added to the game, and usually it's to combat things like rule breaking, botting, or to change elements of gameplay that may harm the game long term. Take the example of anti-dragon shields. Originally, you were able to get an anti-dragon shield before finishing Dragon Slayer. This let bots use the shield without needing to finish the quest, which led to a massive amount of bots farming places like green dragons. Jagex actually pulled a change asking if the community wanted to lock the shield behind the quest, but it failed. Jagex, however, found it to be too important of a change to not put in the game, so they made an executive decision to add it as an unpulled update, an integrity change, even though the community originally didn't vote for it. The same thing was done to box traps, which could originally be immediately used by everyone, but are now locked behind the Eagle's Peak quest. Quite a few of these integrity changes have happened over the years. Remember when you were able to splash for up to 6 hours at a time, or when Zalr's loot table was so good that they twice had to nerf the drops? For the majority of these changes, I'd say they were worth it and beneficial for the long-term health of the game. But recently, Jagex has been posting about another integrity change, one that would change items that have been in the game since the very first day of Old School RuneScape release, and a lot of people aren't happy. The equipment rebalance update was scheduled to be released on February 10th, but in a surprise news post, Jagex once again announced that the update would be delayed. This is what the best in slot gear looked like for melee slash bonus, ranged, and magic combat styles in 2013, when Old School RuneScape was released. Here's what they look like now. Most things have obviously changed. The Warrior Helm is the sole item that has stayed best in slot for melee, Magic has 0 items from 2013 that are still best in slot, and Ranged only has 1 item, Barrow's Gloves. Now, the game is 8 years old. It makes sense that the current best in slot gear setups are so different. Without gear upgrades, what else would new bosses and content offer to the game? But here's a more important comparison. Let's say it's 2013. You're in the wilderness doing a clue scroll and trying to survive from PKers. This would be a fairly common setup to tank. I'm being a bit generous with the Crystal Shield, so you could swap it with a Runekite Shield or Abi Shield. A fairly cheap setup that gave you a good chance to survive. 8 years later, in 2021, you would expect all of this to completely change, right? With every combat style receiving major best-in-slot upgrades, you would think that this setup would change. Well, this is what a common tank setup looks like in 2021. Not a lot has changed. Torag's legs could be swapped out with Black D'hide chaps, but both were still available in 2013. The 2 new items are the Din's Bulwark and a Blessing. You can of course bring some new items with you to tank, but many of the items are expensive and not something people are willing to risk losing. The issue is that the setup is still very effective at tanking and surviving, mainly in the wilderness. Risking 50k and being able to easily survive against someone with much more expensive gear has been a large topic of discussion over the years, mainly for the PvP community. A rift seems to have grown over the years between 2 communities, the PvP community and the non-PvP community. The PvP community asks for very little. From my understanding, they simply want Jagex to give them even just a few updates a year. For the most part, Jagex has largely ignored them, and because of this, thousands of PvP-focused players have quit the game, leading to a mostly empty wilderness. Casual PKing has dropped to an all-time low. The wilderness is mainly dominated by clans, and many of these clans are incredibly toxic, with things like DDoSing and hate speech being very common. This is what the non-PvP community hates about PvP, and it's led to almost every single poll about PvP to not pass. If a player hates the wilderness and they see an update about it, they'll vote no to that update. Not because they don't think it's good for the game, but they spite vote no because they hate PvP. And because these polls don't pass, the PvP community hates the non-PvP community more and more, and the rift continues to grow. I could talk way more about this topic, but I instead want to focus on the changes that Jagex wants to make, and the big one is to an armor set that's been in the game since 2004, so it's been there since the beginning of Old School, Black D'hide. They mentioned that the armor is notoriously powerful at a very low cost. It offers high defense bonuses, especially against magic, with negligible negative stats to offset this. Because of this, they'd like to lower the overall defense bonuses of all tiers of Dragonhide. I'll give a short breakdown of all the changes they'd like to make, but if you want to see the numbers behind the changes, I'll leave a link to the news post below that you can check out. Black D'hide body and chaps would see a heavy nerf to their melee defense and a slight nerf to their magic and range defense. The Van Braces would see a slight nerf to their melee defense and no nerf to their ranged and magic defense. Blessed D'hide armor would not be changed as it's locked behind treasure trails, so Invest in Dragonhide. To the moon! Changing an iconic set of armor that's remained unchanged for over 15 years is a big change, but it may be a necessary one. The high defense bonuses of the Din's bulwark are deemed to be too powerful. The shield has some niche uses in PvM, but it's mainly used in PvP, which is where its main issues lie. With these changes, the melee defense of the shield would go down, the range defense would go up, and its magic defense would go from 0 to -10. Arguably, the biggest change would happen to the toxic blowpipe, one of the most controversial weapons to ever enter the game. This update would see the blowpipe's range strength and ranged bonus decrease, while its special attack would receive 100% increased accuracy. It's quite the heavy nerf, making the blowpipe a lot less viable than before. Darts would also be changed, with bronze through mithril all receiving nerfs. A lot of times, using a blowpipe even with bronze darts was the best thing you could do when it came to killing a boss, which was way too overpowered. Adamant, rune, and dragon darts would see their accuracy go down, but their strength would go up, meaning the blowpipe will not hit as consistently, but when it does, can hit very hard. The team has listed lots of data and charts going over what kind of impact the change would have on the weapon, and how it would now compare to other weapons in different setups. I'd really recommend checking it out if you want a more in-depth analysis of what would change. Items that are rarely used, like the Dragon Bone Necklace, Bone Crusher Necklace, Crystal Armor, and Crystal Bow would all see slight buffs to help make them more viable. The Twisted Bow would see a complete nerf to its prayer bonus, as well as changing the requirement to use it from level 75 ranged to level 85 ranged. Speaking of level requirements, there are 11 items that would have their level requirements increased. The Grazi Rapier, Blade of Sildor, Inquisitor's Mace, Trident of the Swamp, Sanguinesti Staff, Kodai Wand, the base Nightmare Staff, the Nightmare Staff with any orb attached, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, Dragon Hunter Lance, and the Scythe of Vitor. These items are some of the most powerful weapons in the game and have requirements that are much lower than their perceived or actual strength. Because of this, it leaves a lot less room for new potential items to be introduced. This leads to a massive issue in many MMORPGs: power creep. It's already made its way into old school, but it hasn't completely taken over. Increasing the requirements of many of these items will help in the process of slowing down the power creep. This does leave certain accounts that have built their stats around these items kind of in the dust, but they see this as a necessary change, even if it isn't the ideal solution for everyone. Warhammers, maces, spears, and hostae would receive buffs. Metal armors would also see a change. Heavy armors like plate bodies, full helms, and kite shields would see their negative range bonus increased, while med helms and square shields would have all negative range bonuses removed. Originally, the Nezi face guard was going to be changed, but they've decided against it, and now plan on changing Basilisk Knights instead. The 3 item changes that I've seen most people talk about are the change to Dragonhide, the blowpipe, and the Din's bulwark. After talking to quite a few of my PvP-focused content creator friends, the majority of the PvP community is okay with almost all these changes. It's just a shame that it's gotten to a point where this needs to happen. All of these changes were scheduled to come into the game in early February, before the release of Old School RuneScape on Steam. In 2 days, we'll see the game released on the biggest PC gaming platform on the internet. A lot of eyes are going to be on the game, so I'm curious if part of the reason for delaying this was that they didn't want such a massive and controversial update to be rolled out right before the release. Their reason for the delay is so that they can take more time to conduct additional analysis, continue to iterate on the design, and work further on how they want to implement it. Again, since this is a game integrity update, none of these changes are going to be pulled. I do think Jagex wouldn't mind pulling them, but they see the whole spite voting no issue as a big problem. In no world would I see a poll asking the player base if they want to see Dragonhide and a Din's bulwark nerfed reaching 75%. There's way too many people that dislike PvP and are going to hijack the poll. Why would they vote yes to an update that they don't like? I am curious to see if this could be a future trend for PvP updates. If Jagex wants to help out the PvP community, but all of their pulled updates keep failing, do they just instead add the update as a game integrity change? Something I do like is that Jagex has recently done some PvP exclusive polls, meaning only people that have spent a decent amount of time with PvP related content are able to vote in these polls. So what do you guys think? Obviously this is a touchy subject, but I'd love to see some discussion in the comments about the equipment rebalancing update itself and the decision by Jagex to delay it. Thanks for watching today's video. At the moment, I'm in the process of pre-making a lot of videos because we've started filming Gillinor Game Season 2, and I'd like to be able to release content for you all while I'm editing the series. I am reaching all the way down into my video ideas bin and trying to make as much content as I can. I do apologize if the videos slow down a little bit, but I want to make the second season of GG as epic as I can, so it's going to take up quite a bit of my time, but hey, it's a sacrifice that I think is going to be totally worth it. If you'd like to see more of my videos, check out my recent one where I talked about Jagex's new client that's coming out with the Steam release, as well as my unusual money-making video, which did not hit sub boxes, which very frustrating, but it's definitely worth the watch. I mean, I found the best new unusual money-making method.